Hey everybody, the fall weather has landed on us here in northern Michigan. So not only is it the warm cider and hot cocoa type of weather, we've had a lot of really cold temperatures at nights, a lot of times in the 30s. So a lot of our plants are either done for the season and they've lost their leaves, and other ones are still hanging in there. And so this puts us in a little bit of a no man's land, because when it comes to my fall cleanup, for me, I prefer to wait until the plants have lost all their foliage and that's kind of done for the season before I start doing my fall cleanup. That way I can do everything all at once, and I just find it easier that way. But that doesn't mean that we can't plan for next season in our gardens. And that big way that I do it is, this is when I like to go shopping. Now, for those of you farther south, you're not going to be seeing these kind of temperatures and this kind of weather probably for a couple more weeks. But for us here in the north, probably a lot of the sales started at greenhouses and nurseries last month. So this is kind of a last chance for those of us up here, because I know from experience, these greenhouses and nurseries do not want to overwinter these plants. So they're going to offer a lot of different discounts. So we started discounting last month. We are closed for the season now, but we're going to open up for 2 days this week for like a pop-up sale. And we're doing a lot of buy one, get one deals. So that's a really good opportunity. So I'm going to walk through and show you how to shop for these kind of discounts, because I think a lot of people, when they come in, are expecting things to look like they do in June, and things look different, and I think you have to shop a little bit differently. So let me give you some tips on how to shop like a pro in a greenhouse or nursery at the end of the season. As a general rule, a lot of people say, hey, don't plant your evergreens at the end of the season. They don't have enough time to get established. And because they have these evergreen leaves, they need a little bit more moisture in the wintertime. Now, here in northern Michigan, for the really hardy varieties of evergreens, we don't really have much of a problem with that. So usually we can put them in the ground, plant them up, and they're going to do just as well as if they were in a pot, even better usually. So we don't worry too much about that. However, any plant that would be right on the border of our zone, so we're on the cold end of zone 5, so anything that's a zone 5, I wouldn't recommend planting now, or if you do, make sure you mulch it really well, make sure there's a lot of moisture. Now, we did have a really dry September and October with a little extra heat, so our ground is a lot drier than it normally is. So it is a good idea to make sure that you have a lot of moisture around that plant that you're putting in, and then just make sure that the soil doesn't get dry. You don't want it muddy or mucky or anything like that, but you want to make sure that they are getting some moisture, because if they dry out in the winter, that can cause some problems for them. So some of the plants that we really avoid here are going to be things like the like azaleas and rhododendrons. Those usually are right on our border zone, and then they also tend to just need a little bit more time to establish. So those I like to plant earlier in the season. A lot of the ornamentals that are zone 5, I'm going to avoid those as well. So some of the magnolias and some of those other kind of higher zone trees that we tend to enjoy here, but they're a little bit riskier to plant. So I tend to avoid those. However, if you get a good deal, sometimes you can't resist, and it's worth the risk. Now, when you're shopping for shrubs, you need to kind of retrain your brain in how you shop for these, because, hey, if this was June and this plant looked like this, I'd be like, no way, that thing looks deadly. Meanwhile, right now, this is a lilac. It's actually just fine for this time of year. It's starting to go dormant. It's going to start losing its leaves. And you just have to accept the fact that, hey, this is a plant that is going to look a little bit rough now, but I also know it's a zone 3 hardy plant, so it's going to be fine when I put it in the ground. And the other thing that people don't realize, that even after the plants lose their leaves, the roots will continue to develop until the ground freezes. So that's why they usually recommend like waiting like 6 to 8 weeks before your ground freezes. You know, that's the best time to plant these out. But we find that even if we go right until the ground freezes, it's fine to plant them out there, because remember, we're going to be storing these in these nursery pots over the winter, and they make it through just fine. It's just that if you have them in the ground for that time, they're going to have that little bit of advantage for next season, and you're going to get that little bit extra boost for next year, and so they're going to be in even better shape than if you were to plant, you know, just keep them in their cans and plant them out later. So if you can get them in the ground now, it's really still a good time. Even if they're losing their leaves, you're going to see some root development on them. The other thing you have to watch out for is that, you know, even when the plants are leaves are kind of mangy looking. A lot of times too, like we've gone through and trimmed some of our plants, and the reason why we trim some of these now is simply because they were still taking up water, and once we trim them, that usually triggers them to go dormant. Now, there is a risk that if we have a big warm up for several days, that it could encourage some new growth, but for the most part, we've had such cold conditions that most of these plants have decided like we are done for the season. But I'll show you some of the plants that we've trimmed back. Some of them still look really good. Other ones just look like twigs, so let me show you what those look like. So these spirea have just gotten a little bit of a trim up just to tidy them up. They're going to be in better shape for next season. This is going to be just fine. So, I mean, if I saw this at a different point in the season, I think it was dying, but really right now it's just going dormant. That's all I have to do is dig a hole the size of this pot, pop this in there, fill it in, make sure that I've got a good amount of moisture around it, and this plant will just continue to do well. But if you look at plants like these dogwood here, so this is a yellow twig dogwood, this is a red twig dogwood. We've trimmed these back already, and part of the reason why we did that is that these dogwoods tend to love their water, and they are really getting a little bit root bound in here, and so they were sucking up a lot of water. We definitely wanted these to be triggered to go dormant earlier because we knew that they would just be drying out. So that was our plan with these. So these look rough now, but nice thing about dogwood is that they get all that new growth, and it's the new growth that tends to have the best color, whether it be the yellow or the red. So that's always nice. And then we have lots of other shrubs kind of around here. It's been a little windy, so some things got knocked around, but I always love the color of the Fothergilla. It's just a really nice one. Let me get some of these up. I mean, that is just beautiful. And you'll also start seeing some of the oranges. It's a really nice one. I always like to stop by the roses this time of year because they tend to get a really good flush of flowers at the end of the season when the temperatures start going down. It's kind of their last call. And this one here has been particularly nice. This is the Rise Up Ringo, and it's a beautiful yellow. And if we look at this kind of older bloom, it does fade only slightly, but it really holds its color well. And it gets the name Ringo simply because it has that little orange ring inside there. So very happy with that. And look at how beautiful the foliage is on this. So we have a couple of the Rise Ups, but normally we have more of the Easy Elegance because those do really well in our colder temperatures. But hey, that's a real beauty over there. We've been keeping our perennials indoors, so they're still in bloom. So like we have this clematis, look at how beautiful that is, just covered in blooms. And you do have to realize that once you get them outside in the cold, they are going to quickly go dormant, so they're going to quickly look bad. Don't panic, as long as they're zone hardy. This is normal for them to do that. Look at this, is that Princess Diana clematis, and I love when it's finished. It does get those little frilly centers that pop out. And so as you're shopping for these, like these are really easy decision makers to go for, because you're like, hey, look at this beautiful phlox still blooming. And that's one of the nice things about a lot of these new varieties. Look at this over here. There's some Coreopsis still in bloom, a little tiny bit of Veronica as well, and then like the yarrow, and look at the Echinops too. This is that globe thistle type stuff, or actually I think Eryngium is the globe thistle, but it definitely has that beautiful blue type flower, some salvia in here. But let me show you some plants that maybe aren't looking quite as good, but are still worth taking a look at. Now, some of the perennials on this bench might look a little weary, or they might look a little small, and that's because these have been trimmed back. We've gotten a little jump start on our trimming this year, and what we're doing is trimming them back and getting them ready for winter. And so what we're going to do is be hauling them into winter storage. But there's a problem with winter storage. That means that we have to protect them from the voles, from the rabbits, from the deer. We also have to then haul them and then haul them back out in the spring, and we really don't want to do that. So most places will try to sell these before they put them into any kind of storage or have to put up with them through the winter. At least in northern climates, that's the case. So this is a really good time to look at these and just really commit to saying, you know what, it doesn't look pretty now, but I'm buying this as an investment for next year and the years after that. So don't panic if you notice, hey, this thing's looking a little small, because if you were here, earlier in the season, like you saw this grass, it was probably 3 feet tall and had plumes and everything. We've cut it back already. So we're getting a jump start on our cleaning. And I'm going to tell you a little something that I don't know if I'm really supposed to tell you about this. I think a lot of growers or plant companies would wish I didn't talk about this, but I'm going to, because a lot of these plants are also prime plants for dividing. And so I usually do my dividing more in the spring or more like in June, but you could divide them now, or you could plant them out for the winter, and then later on next year, you could give them a divide, and you could get a lot more plants out of these. So I'm going to show you the ones that I find the easiest to divide. Don't think you can just divide any plant. So don't fall for that. Don't think, I'm going to just buy a whole bunch of limelight hydrangeas and just going to cut them into pieces and plant them out and they're going to be fine. That's not the case. There's a whole different process for propagating, but there are some that are really easy to divide. So let me show you. I've got them on a wagon here. Going to be really easy to kind of give you some tips on how to make this happen. So first of all, if you're thinking about dividing, you need to look at plants that are really filling out the pot. So if you have just a little stem in the middle, that's not really ready to be divided yet. But something like this grass here, you could easily divide it. And what we usually use is like, this is where serrated blades become your friend. So whether it's a Sawzall or, like an old butter knife or some kind of blade like this, that's all you do is you take it out of the pot, you can cut it right down the middle usually. Sometimes you can cut it into thirds or into quarters. It kind of depends on how much. You do want to make sure that there is some bulk there. So you want to make sure that there's some roots and some extra space in there. And sometimes if something's really root bound, you can also go in. Let me just pull this off for you. Maybe I can do this one for you so you can see it. So look at the roots on this. This is really got a decent amount of root action going on. So a lot of times what I'll do, and sorry, I didn't plan on doing it this way, so we're just gonna make the best of it. A lot of times I'll just cut off the bottom inch here. So I'm gonna have to set it down here to do that. So just gonna go in there. Sorry, I'm not getting you a better view. How about I move the camera on just a little bit? There we go. And so I'm just cutting off the bottom. You don't have to do this part, but sometimes it helps and just kind of gives you also a little more room if you're putting it into another pot. Then you can just kind of go through here. And sometimes the plants are going to have a natural spot where you can definitely see there's a clump. And so you want to save that clump. With this one, it's pretty consistent. So I'm just going to go through and just cut right down the middle of this one. Now you don't want to cut it up too small, especially this time of year, unless you had some, a place that you could keep it where it could kind of stay, and get some root development over the time. This is really quite firm, and that's the thing about grasses. Sometimes they're just beasts. There we go. A little easier from this way, but boy, this one's really, I'm putting a lot of effort into this. There we go. There, once I get it started. So then we just cut it in half. And all of these are going to be similar. Each one is a little bit different. But now, that's all you have to do is dig a hole this size. Now, if you want to break up these roots, you can. Usually it's okay if you don't. And then you can pop this in. In theory, I could cut it again right here, but sometimes I like to play it safe. And so then this is something that you just pop into the ground, or if you needed to keep it in a pot over the winter, you could do that. Although I would recommend if you're going to keep it in a pot, keep it like this in the pot over the winter, and then next spring do this kind of division. But for right now, if you really want to divide now, you can. Let's look at some of these other ones. So this here is a salvia. And when I get into this salvia, I'm going to look, and you're going to see that there's these kind of clusters of different kind of groupings of this plant. So I know that I could cut this right down the middle, and there's going to be a good number on this side, good number on that side, and they're going to do okay. So this is one where I can do almost the exact same thing. Catmint is the very same story. So when I go in here and I kind of dig down, it's, there's a couple of twigs. Let's see how well I can see. So there's a twig coming out right here. There's another one over here. There's more on this side. You can also see if you look here, so this is its own little thing. So if I kind of come through and I just look at where it's coming out of the ground, I could potentially get 3 plants out of this one. 1, 2, and 3 over here. So something to consider as you're going through. Daylilies are super easy. Now these I do a little bit differently. Let me get this moved a little. So what I would do is take this out, and then a lot of times I'll kind of do a little bit where I kind of keep the bulk of it, and then I just kind of rock it and find out where it'll most naturally break, and then I just break it in half. So on this one, I know I could get 2 off of this. There's a potential that all these little plants could become, separate ones. I wouldn't maybe go that far in with it. Some of the other plants I have here, like this here is a Veronica, and Veronica is another one that you can do this division on. And this is a Proven Winners variety. So I am going to note that, like, Proven Winners and other plant companies, many other plant companies do have rules on propagation and dividing and that type of thing. And this is considered a type of propagation when you do this division. So me as a seller, I can't divide this and then sell you 2 plants instead of 1. That's not how it works. You at home, Proven Winners, I've seen them on videos even explain, like, hey, we understand, like, when you're at home, a lot of these plants are going to benefit from division. So as long as it's for your personal use in your personal yard, not a problem. But if you're even thinking of selling a couple of these, like you're going to divide it and try to sell it, it's really important that you're aware of which plants are protected and which ones are not, because it is illegal to divide and sell varieties that you haven't paid the royalties on. So just keep that in mind. If you're planning to sell in your yard, I don't think anybody's going to come after you. So with this one, it's kind of the same story. Now, we have already, like, instead of dividing this, what we end up doing is potting them up. So we get them as a quart, and then we put it like in a 2 quart, or I think it's a 1 quart or 1 gallon Royale or something like this, and then this one is like a true, 1 gallon. And so at this point, people are not going to spend more for this in a bigger size. People don't want a 2 gallon Veronica. So it's really important that we sell this now. And again, you don't have to divide this now. You can wait till next year. Springtime's a really great time to do some division on these. So you could just pop it in the ground, and then you know, next spring you could always pop it out or do your division right there, or you could keep it in the container. Another thing you could do is just dig a hole and put the pot in the hole for the winter, just to kind of keep it insulated. And then in the springtime you can pull it out and then do your division and do your planting then. So lots of ways you can do that. Another one, and it's more of a shrub that you can do this kind of division with, is an arborescent hydrangea. I'm going to stress only arborescent varieties, so don't think you can get your limelight or one of those big blue or pink ones and just cut it up into pieces and it's going to do okay. But the arborescent varieties are a little different because they do die back, and you could mow these right down to the ground and they're still going to bounce back. And this is going to be that same kind of thing where I could just find a spot down the middle, or off to the side even. And if you look at this one here, you can see like there's a cluster of roots, like these three, I don't know how well you can see that, are kind of on their own. So I'm seeing a very natural spot for me to cut that away. So I kind of just cut in there, get those pieces out, or I just cut it in half. The arborescent varieties are very forgiving about that. And I have done these in the winter time, and they've done fine too. So these are really resilient to this kind of division this time of year. So don't be afraid to do the arborescent varieties. And arborescent varieties are going to have names like Annabelle, Invincible, Incredible, and I'm trying to think, there's a couple other ones, like the new Flowerful one that's coming out is another variety. So there's only, there aren't a ton of these kind, but these are the big ball-shaped ones. So I just wanted to tell you about these options because I think it's a really good way for you to get more plants and really make your money go a little farther. And I'm not afraid to tell you about this because most people who take the time to divide their plants, in general, these are the same people who always want a new plant or always want a new variety. So it's not like I'm cutting into business here. I'm just rewarding the people who are probably the most diligent and most loyal customers, and giving them tips on how to make that money go farther so that they have that extra money for more plants. So something to keep in mind. Also, it's another way, like even if these are growing already in your yard, know that these varieties, you could divide them next spring and you'll have no problems as well. So I wanted to just give you guys that update. Hope that you're enjoying kind of as fall comes in. I know a lot of you haven't even had any fall weather yet, although I drove all the way out to Pennsylvania and I was starting to see color last week or so. So I know everybody's going to start seeing a good color show. We're really lucky. We're having a lot of reds, yellows, and oranges this year. Some years it just kind of goes straight to yellow. And this year we're getting some deep, rich colors, but it's been so windy, all the leaves are blowing off. So anyway, wanted to give you guys this little update. I have been on the road a lot, so I haven't been able to make a lot of videos, but I'm back in town, so I've got a lot of things lined up and lots of work to do. So I'll talk to you guys all very, very soon.